Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's FPC Radio Live. It is Monday, November the 14th, 2022, and we just got off probably the best weekend. I'm not going to say of the entire season, but certainly of the last several weeks. We had a lot of entertaining football and a lot of football with a lot of implications, John. And what we thought a couple weeks ago, I would say, has been completely turned upside down at this point as we're just about to wrap up week 10.
Yeah, I think yesterday, Ian, we saw the game of the year, Minnesota 33-30. At the start of the day, Buffalo was the number one seed in the AFC, and after losing that overtime thriller to Minnesota, they're now the number 6 seed in the AFC. So the Super Bowl favorites may not be the Super Bowl favorites right now. Not to mention what goes on in the NFC. You know, Dallas with an opportunity to move up in the standings, loses to Green Bay, also in overtime. I mean, if you just watched two games yesterday, Minnesota-Buffalo, which ended up in overtime, and then Green Bay-Dallas, which ended up in overtime, those were two wildly entertaining games. And the league kind of needed that because a lot of the games, you've kind of been a slugfest or slogfest throughout the season. So it was good for the league as well.
And they had some implications to it. It wasn't just bad football or two bad teams that really had nothing. I mean, I still don't think, certainly with Minnesota winning, I still don't think Green Bay really has a shot. That was an unbelievable win last night, and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, some of those deep passes to Christian Watson there. I mean, those were incredible. And again, it makes people look foolish when you're sitting there screaming "washed, washed, washed, washed" and all that stuff. But I mean, I still don't think. I mean, I feel like they're almost a little too far behind, John. Although yesterday kind of kept that door cracked a little bit, not so much for the division, but certainly maybe to compete with the rest of the NFC, because, we both talked about this game heading into it, and we're like, okay, this is the Cowboys' game to win. If they're ever going to beat Green Bay, it's going to be this season, because they look like they finally got it all together. They've won some games, some close games. They're winning without having Dak Prescott. They're winning with Dak Prescott. That was huge, and not only does it impact the Cowboys, who, in a normal season, being 6-3 might give you a nice, comfortable lead in the NFC East. You have the Giants breathing down your neck. So not only does this kind of throw a wrinkle in the NFC East, it kind of throws a wrinkle in the NFC in general, because now the Cowboys are down to 6-3. The Bucs have now moved to 5-5, and I'm not 100% ready to go all in yet. But all of a sudden they're looking like they're just creeping up, because right now the division is they're running away with it, so to speak. And I laugh when I say that, because they're 5-5 right now, but you know how it is. So to me, I'm looking at yesterday, and not just the NFC, but specifically when it comes to the Cowboys Packers, this really threw kind of a big wrinkle in the NFC.
Yeah, it gives Green Bay at least an opportunity to still be alive. They're 4-6. You got 7 games left. You play this Thursday against Tennessee at Lambeau. If you can win that game, now you're 5-6, and you're in playoff contention, because I think you can make the playoffs in the NFC at 9-8. The AFC might be more difficult, but that possibility still exists there. And look, once you get in, if Brady and Rodgers get in, they'll be the two best quarterbacks in the NFC. And I know that Jalen Hurts is an MVP candidate, and Geno Smith has played really well, and Dak Prescott's a good quarterback. But, if Brady and Rodgers get into the tournament, they will be the two best quarterbacks in the NFC. So I don't think teams will be thrilled to meet them at some point. And then there'll be no expectations in terms of Green Bay, right? I mean, if they go 9-8 and sneak in as a wild card and have to go to, I don't know, wherever, Philadelphia, in the divisional round, no one's going to expect them to win. So there'll be no pressure on them, which might be a good thing for them, rather than being at home as the number 1 seed where there's a lot of pressure. We've seen that in sports forever, right? Like a team is a 6 seed in the NBA, and all of a sudden they get on fire at the right moment. Next thing you know, they're sitting in the finals.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there can definitely be something to be said about that. And I think at this point, the Packers are playing with. I mean, what do they have to lose right now? Again, I still don't think that they're gonna. I just don't think that they're gonna make a run, because I just feel like the hole they dug is just, and they can't rely on the division mostly, because with Minnesota at 7-1, it would take, let's just say, it would take a very epic collapse. And unfortunately for the Packers, they only have one game left against Minnesota, and they already lost the first one. So there's a lot of things working against the Packers, but I mean, again, you think about what happened yesterday, and that's just a classic. The Cowboy, it's like, you remember that photo from a few years ago of the one Packers fan and that sea of Cowboys fans when they were like celebrating going up late, and they posted on Twitter like, they gave Aaron Rodgers like a minute, and naturally Rodgers went down and won the game for the Packers. That's kind of what it felt like yesterday, because I mean, look, the Cowboys had a 14-point lead going into the fourth quarter, and I'm not. It's weird, John. I think we're going to look back at this season, and I think we've already kind of set a record pace so far through whatever 9-10 games for the number of double-digit comebacks in the second half. It's been quite remarkable. I mean, Buffalo's blown 3 of them themselves. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think there's in terms of how many times we've seen this happen, it's been the most through 10 weeks at this point in the season. And yesterday was just another example of it, of the Cowboys, who this has never happened in their franchise history, or at least in the last like 30, 40 years. They haven't blown a lead in the fourth quarter like this. So it's an impressive win by the Packers. Certainly one where I thought they didn't really have a chance going into it, because, they managed to stay neck and neck 14-14, and then I'm seeing it, or 13-13, whatever it was. And then it was 27-14 Cowboys. And I'm like, all right, this is kind of where the Packers really haven't had that ability to come back. I mean, if they can get a lead and kind of coast on that, they're okay. But trying to come back and mount a comeback like this, I just felt like they didn't have it. But again, they proved me wrong. They proved a lot of people wrong. And it might have been the most impressive victory of the weekend, had it not been for a couple other games this weekend, which I think we just put all of our eggs in one basket and had a great weekend of football.
Yeah, not to mention Jeff Saturday winning his coaching debut, which was great and absolutely set off the likes of Joe Thomas or Bill Cowher, who, are just beside themselves that he was hired, although they really never had much to say when, I don't know, Tyreek Hill was breaking the arm of his son, or whatever Antonio Brown was doing. They never really got up in arms about that stuff, but they're up in arms about a guy getting hired as a coach who won his debut, by the way.
Yeah. And look, what did I say last week? It was like, what the hell? Yeah. I mean, the normal process of hiring coaches is, I mean, less than successful all the time. You know what I mean? Like, we're seeing it all every time. It's like, oh, this coach or that coach. And, Josh McDaniels is, again, I mean, I said maybe, he started his last tenure out 6-0. So, hey, if he starts out 1-7, maybe it'll have the exact opposite. But the reality of it is, who's going to win with this Raiders team? This Raiders team hasn't won in 20 years. And like, I know it's easy to pile on Josh McDaniels, and he certainly obviously has a hand in this, but their quarterback's just not good. You know what I mean? And what do you how do you expect to win with this Raiders team that, I mean, every coach that has come in there has failed? I mean, everyone now is saying, oh, well, they wanted Rich Bisaccia. Do you really think it would have been better with him? No. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
The thing about the Raiders, and we talked about this at the beginning of the year, they went 10-7 last year. They played a tough game against Cincinnati in the playoffs. But if you look back at last year, they were 4-0 in overtime. They had some miraculous comeback wins. They were actually outscored significantly during the season, but they made it to the postseason. Congratulations. That has a way of flipping back around the following year, and that's what you've seen here, where the Raiders have lost a lot of close games. That's why you look at Minnesota. They're 8-1. They're going to probably be the 2 seed in the NFC. Don't be surprised next year if they're 8-9, because a lot of these games that they're winning this year, they'll probably lose next year. I mean, you needed some form of miracles to happen yesterday to win that game for Minnesota. They hung in there. They were down 17 points at one point, 27-10. Dalvin Cook goes for 81 yards. They're back in the game. Buffalo did a lot of stupid things. Josh Allen went from being a MVP favorite to kind of out of the discussion now with that game yesterday with 2 interceptions, and then he couldn't even handle a snap to ice the game. But that's what Minnesota needed to win, and that's what you take advantage of. But that's how the NFL is. There aren't many teams that year in and year out are just, always winning 11, 12 games and doing it in a pretty fashion. You just don't see that very often.
except for the Patriots for nearly 20 years.
The Patriots for 20 years, exactly. And I'll say to a point, Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City is generally a 12-win team every year.
Yeah, and that's, they're forging their run now, but even it's funny to think, it's like, wow, Kansas City obviously has been on a very impressive run the last 4 or 5 years, and then you sit there and you think about, and this isn't an insult to Kansas City, this is just kind of laughing at what we saw with the Patriots, and it was like that's just a fraction of what the Patriots and Brady did, and Belichick over the course of 20 years. But that's the thing, it's like you're not you're not going to be usually have there's going to be a couple teams like that. And I thought yesterday and a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the second half the Bills had. And this is, we're going to talk a little bit about this Bills team right now, because I think there are a lot of things that are concerning, least of which is the fact that they're third in the AFC East and may never actually get that back, John. I don't think it's any sure thing at this moment, the way Miami's playing. But Minnesota, to your point, yeah, they needed a few things to happen. They also had a lot of bad luck go against them. That Gabe Davis catch was not a catch. And that was obviously something that set up and pushed this game to overtime even to begin with. So did they have some fortunate things happen? Of course. But almost kind of starting to be expected, though, because we're seeing Josh Allen kind of start to revert back to rookie and second year Josh Allen. This is now, 3 weeks in a row? I gave him a pass in the win 3 weeks ago when they just kind of played a bad half, and I thought maybe they were getting bored. But no, there are some concerning things, because he's making not just bad interceptions, but terrible decisions. The entire game, that game was won by Buffalo. I mean, look, you put blame put blame on the coaching staff for not taking those points in the field goal that led to the interception in the end zone. Mm-hmm. I don't care what you say. Oh, Minnesota this, Minnesota that. You have the best defense in the league. You can prevent them from scoring 7 points at that point that late in the game. And not only do you make the poor decision to go for it on fourth down, foregoing the free points essentially, but Josh Allen throws. This was a boneheaded pick. This wasn't just a pass that got deflected or something that was close. I don't know what he was looking at. Maybe the Minnesota defender. And for some reason he thought, hey, this is a good idea. Let me throw it right at him. And, the thing is, he's doing that a lot. Not just interceptions in the red zone, but bad interceptions. Like throws where you're like, where was he even going with that pass? So for me, I'll ask you, like, what's the concern level with this Buffalo team? Because they're at 6-3 right now. It's obviously not terrible, but they're now third in the AFC East. Miami 7-3. They still have 2 games against the Patriots. They are already, I believe, 0-2 in the division. And they have some pretty key matchups still coming up. Like, what's your concern level for this Buffalo team? Because I think what would have been blasphemous to say a few weeks ago now becomes a reality, and that is, could this team really maybe come close to missing the playoffs?
I don't think they'll miss the playoffs, but there are some concerns there. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. In the second half against Green Bay, they kind of just laid down. And Green Bay, which isn't really an explosive offense, weren't able to come back. But I like some things Green Bay did in the second half of that game 2 Sunday nights ago, and I was kind of alarmed by things that Buffalo didn't do in that second half. We saw it last week. They lost to the Jets again with turnovers. Josh Allen's thrown 10 interceptions this year already, which is more than he threw all of last year. So that's a concern. I'm not crazy about the coach. I think he's a cheerleader, Sean McDermott. I mean, even on plays near the sideline, he's waving his arms, like, keep the clock running, keep the clock running. He always seems to be in the way of almost getting hit by a player, too. Yeah. Like, I don't know if there's any other coach in the league that gets close to a collision than Sean McDermott. I'm not a big fan of his. I think he looks like a state trooper to begin with. I just look at him and think state trooper Sean McDermott. But there's concerns there. They've got some injuries on defense. And when they were up 10 points going in for another score, and he throws that interception, and Joe Davis, who was a play-by-play guy on Fox, so was like, are you watching the same game I'm watching? Goes, no big deal. Well, if it's just throwing in completion there, Minnesota takes over at the 6th. Instead, They intercept it. Peterson takes it out to the 34, and Josh Allen almost kills himself trying to tackle him. Like that was a huge
he's not going to
play.
he's not going to last long in this league if
No,
he keeps playing the way he's
big
playing.
And strong. Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I'm sitting here watching.
He hurts himself sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sitting here watching the game yesterday, and it's like, look, you're dealing with this injury. I know he was cleared to play, and they're like, oh, everything's good. You know, you're not gonna re-injure yourself or injure yourself anymore. And I get like his ability to run is an advantage, but he, like I said, he's not going to last another 5-6 years in this league if he keeps playing the way he's playing. And he's certainly never going to reach that potential that I think some people believe he can reach at a certain point, because again, it's just not going to last for him if he keeps this up, because it's not just taking hits here and there. It's almost like he's seeking out contact, like he's a running back. And,
right.
And you got to get that out of your system. At this point in your career, you should not have that type of mentality, you know, and it's, I don't know, like I said, if I'm a Buffalo fan, I am concerned, because I do think, look, the silver lining in all this, and you kind of mentioned it already, they have a number of defensive guys that should be back, which will help kind of settle things, but it doesn't change the things that we've seen from Josh Allen this season, and mainly the turnovers. And again, not just turnovers, but bad ones. And we haven't even talked about the fumbled snap at the end of the game, you know, that obviously gave Minnesota the touchdown to begin with. So it's been a really rough couple weeks for this Buffalo team. And like I said, I kind of like half kidding, like mentioned, oh, they still have to play the Patriots twice. What are the Patriots really good at? If there's anything, I mean, I think the Patriots are a pretty good, solid team, you know, certainly not like maybe a Super Bowl contender, but what are the Patriots really, really good at?
Well, they'll take advantage of your mistakes, and they'll force turnovers if need be, right?
Exactly.
And they can run the football, and Buffalo's had trouble stopping the run. I do think part of the thing with Buffalo, and sometimes Kansas City has trouble stopping the run, I think because they're such explosive offenses, they're built to defend the pass and hold leads, kind of like the Colts were 20 years ago. So those numbers can be a little bit misleading, but nonetheless, I mean, Dalvin Cook went for 81 yards yesterday. Just poor tackling, poor gap control by Buffalo. You know, you can't be up 17 points and allow the team to score on one play, 81 yards, because that puts them right back in the game, and now those things happen. Here's the other thing too, Ian. As far as the Buffalo Bills, the last 2 years, they're 18-10. They're 16-1 in games decided by 9 or more points. They are 2-9 in games decided by 8 or fewer points, or one-score games, one-possession games. They can't win close games. And unless they're the 1989 San Francisco 49ers who just zoomed through the playoffs, how can they win a Super Bowl now, especially now that they're not the number one seed? They're going to have to win 4 playoff games to win the Super Bowl. Some of those games are going to be close. Heck, even the Rams last year, and we're kind of making fun of them this year, they did win 3 games by a field goal last year in the postseason. They found ways to win close games. Buffalo is terrible in close games.
Yeah. No, look, that's certainly a concern, because it's like it kind of tells you or gives you a hint that maybe they're missing something. And look, I think I think this is a team that's bought into its hype.
Yep.
And that's a bad thing. I mean, never once, you know, I don't want to say never, but one of the marks of the Patriots dynasty, and one of the reasons why they were always so successful and hungry to win, was that they never bought into the hype. You know, there was obviously a certain confidence level for the 3rd Super Bowl, especially the guys like Rodney Harris. But again, at that point, you've won 2 Super Bowls, you've run through, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to say, like, especially with teams that haven't won, they've acted like they have, and they've acted like if not for some miraculous things here and there, they would have been Super Bowl champions already. Well, you can't have that mentality. Certainly, if you haven't done it yet, you have to stay hungry. And this team, I think, you know, whether it's the win over Kansas City or just maybe again buying too much into the preseason hype, I'm not quite sure, but they're looking like a team that just isn't what we thought they were even 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah, and they've got to turn this thing around, because their own division is that much stronger. Like you said earlier,
all 4 teams are in the playoffs right now, technically, which is again crazy to think. And again, already down 0-2. They still have to play the Patriots twice. They still have to play Miami. You know what I mean? It's I would really start to put a high level of concern on this Bills team because this is not just, again, a week here, week there. This has been a few weeks now trending, including games of which they won, where they haven't played a really complete game start to finish. And
They won the opener 31-10 over the defending Super Bowl champion Rams, and it was impressive. They had 4 turnovers that night.
Yeah.
Like, that's stuff that comes back to bite you at some point. And I'm sure if you're on that coaching staff, you got to continually put that into the head of the team of, like, turnovers are not our friends. They can create turnovers because they got an active defense, but you can't be putting the ball on the ground as often as they do, and you can't have your quarterback throw 10 interceptions.
It's just
god awful number.
Yeah, no, it's a terrible number, and certainly. And look, I mean, these are interceptions that are directly leading to issues and losses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Josh Allen was the reason they lost yesterday. I know there's again there's other plays that could have been made, maybe a call here or call there, but at the end of the day, you're a superstar quarterback, and this is why the quarterbacks get credit for wins and they get credit for losses, because at the end of the day, they're the most important player on the field, and you can't tell me that his interception late in that game, his first one, wasn't a backbreaker. You can't. Obviously, he threw an interception to end the game, and in a situation where they could have at the very least tied it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. It's like you're giving away points and wins by your poor decision making. And again, like I said, I go back to there's a varying degree of types of interceptions. Some aren't necessarily the quarterback's fault, and some are just of the head, the head scratching nature where you're like, what are you looking at? And he did that twice yesterday, twice. I don't know how you come back from that.
There's physical interceptions, right? You make a throw, defensive back makes a really nice play on it, it's deflected, whatever it may be. You didn't make the right throw. But then there's the mental interceptions, and that was the case yesterday where why did you make that throw? Why did you make that throw there? And we saw with Dak Prescott, too, in the Dallas-Green Bay game, you cannot throw late over the middle in the NFL. You just can't. That's just a recipe for interceptions. I don't care if it's Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, or the worst quarterback in football. You cannot do that.
Well, and we're going to get, before we wrap up today's show, we're going to get to the Buccaneers in just a minute. And that's the thing. These are decisions and these are mistakes that he shouldn't be making at this point. If he's the guy that, I think a lot of people have been impressed with over the course of his young career so far, I mean, these are mistakes that cannot be made. So, we're gonna obviously monitor this closely. And like I said, I mean, you went from having the number 1 seed and really the clear path to an MVP for Josh Allen. And since that became the talking point, it's just gone completely downhill for them. So we'll keep an eye on that. So the Buccaneers won again. Good for them. I mean, two in a row heading into the bye week. They're now 5-5. Offense looked better for sure. And the one thing I'm concerned though, John, is I mean, I have a few concerns, but I'm concerned. Like yesterday was probably the best called game for Byron Leftwich this season, but I wasn't impressed at the end of the day. Like, I think the results are still hiding some of the same issues because they ran a lot. And I think, obviously having the 100-yard rusher and Rachaad White, and I think replacing White, replacing Fournette with White is the smart thing, and something the Bucs should have done a couple weeks ago. Because again, at the end of the day, I think he just gives them a better spark in the run game. This run game still stinks, and had they not been so good on third down, mostly passing, John, we would not be having this conversation about, oh, the Bucs figured it out. Look what they did. They ran the ball 30 some odd times. No. Let's pump the brakes on it, because if you go back and look at, again, the efficiency numbers and the success of running the ball, it was still not good. And I hope, John, that this coaching staff does not fool themselves into thinking that that's the formula moving forward, because I thought yesterday it was very apparent what was successful for them. It was pushing the ball downfield. It was using the seams, and it was using some, dare I say, some relatively creative play calling, relative to what they have been doing. So it wasn't like Andy Reid level of creative, but at least they were mixing things up a little bit, passing the ball, and I think they saw a lot of success. So, big win for them against a really good team in Seattle. But I just, again, I'm really hoping that the coaching staff doesn't believe that they're not going to trick themselves into thinking that running is the key to their success.
No, I mean, part of it may have been that they had built up a lead, so you want to try to do that. And I think their defense played pretty well yesterday. Seattle can run the football, and they contained them for the most part yesterday. Geno Smith still had a decent game, but yeah, overall, just to get that win in Germany. Now you're 5-5. You've got a 1-game lead in your division. It's there for you to just take a hold of. Mm-hmm. And also, let's not forget, 2 years ago they were 7-5 at the bye.
Yeah.
So they're 5-5 at the bye this time around. You get that extra week. You get some bodies back. You get Brady refreshed maybe a little bit. You sit down with the coaches, maybe map out a better offensive game plan, and you go from there. They're going to make the playoffs. I don't think there's any question about that. And again, I don't know who wants to face them in the playoffs. It'd still be a scary sight seeing him across the sideline.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you get to 5-5, and all bets are off, because right now you're seeing, okay, well, obviously the Panthers, they're not going to compete. Atlanta, that's, they can they can make some noise and maybe make you sweat a little bit, but they're not going to compete for the division. And I think the Saints aren't, they were good at times last year because they had a really good defense. I don't think they have that right now. So yeah, it's there for them for the taking. I mean, it just isn't going to be easy for them, and that's why I think at the end of the day I'm still a tad bit concerned, because, like I said, this might have been Byron Leftwich's best called game, and again, it's really not saying much, because I still think they had issues. And again, I thank God they won that game, because that call for that fake pass, that running back pass, was one of the worst calls I've ever seen. First of all, you don't make that. I understand giddy about, when they ran for. I'll say this, not first of all, and I'll say this about every elite quarterback. It is a bad idea 100% of the time to take the ball out of your quarterback's hand on a snap. Correct. It is. Yep. I don't want to see Wildcat. I never want to see Rachaad White or Leonard. Leonard Fournette can't even gain a yard getting a handoff. I don't need to see him receiving the snap and taking the ball ever. That's not the type of play calling, creative play calling I want to see. Like, again, I don't think once, aside from direct snaps wherein Brady's still under center and that's a deceptive play, I don't think the Patriots ever took the ball out of his hands on a snap. And why would they? It's the dumbest thing to do. You're purposely downgrading yourself at that position. Anyways, so as much as it was, wide open the first time, I get it. Okay, whatever. Maybe much later in the game, you try to go back at that. You don't do it 2 plays later. And you don't throw that ball when clearly the Seahawks saw what the Bucs saw, and that was, well, Tom Brady was wide open when Leonard Fournette ran before. I mean, had you just tossed the ball out to him, he would have almost walked in for a touchdown, it felt like. He wasn't this time, and it was just dumb altogether. On top of that, the field was obviously a mess. There were so many slips and falls, and obviously Brady slipped there. I mean, imagine if he slipped and ruined his knee.
Right.
And
well, that happened a few years ago. Didn't the Patriots do that in Tennessee? And he banged his knee, and it kind of bothered him for the rest of the year. He's 45 years old. Let's not throw him the football. And again, let's not really throw. Justin Fields or Josh Allen, big, young, strong quarterbacks that, probably go up and grab it. That's fine. But we don't want to see any quarterback get hurt on a trick play like that. It's not the right look. And I agree with you. You get the greatest quarterback of all time. Let him take the snap and decide where the ball's going. They're having a great point guard in basketball, and you're going down for the final shot of the game. Let's take the ball out of his hands and give it to the center who can't pass.
Yeah, and again, it's foolish, and it kind of just, again, gives me pause and concern for about what we're going to see moving forward with this Buccaneers team. Because, look, perfect time for the bye. They needed these 2 big wins, and they were big wins. And I think the offense, is Brady's still as good as he's ever been. I mean, well, I don't want to say that because, I think that disrespects some of his earlier career. And I say earlier, it was like 15 years ago or 10 years ago or even 5. I don't know. He's playing great, like still. I mean, in terms of he still has the arm strength. Obviously, there's not a better decision maker or just someone who's able to read and diagnose a defense better than Tom Brady. And that's one of the reasons why I'll always push back at people saying, oh, this guy or that guy or this guy is already better than him. I'm like, no, guys, relax. Like, let's calm down a little bit. I've seen a lot of really good throws from him. Now, the interception, that was a bad throw. And, it is what it is. I mean, I'm not going to harp on it. Just like I haven't harped on any of the other interceptions except for Josh Allen because obviously he's thrown a lot of them. But it's been a rocky road to start. And again, like I said, I'm still concerned. But, the Bucs have a little bit of momentum going into the bye week. And if there's any, ever a team that could figure that out and get it back to, some semblance of a Super Bowl contender, it might be them because, well, they're getting a little bit healthy. And you said it. I mean, they've played really good defense. And I should have tweeted it when I thought about it because I would have been looked at as like someone with a lot of foresight because I was about to say, I like how the Bucs defense is doing. I still need to see a turnover. We haven't seen that in so long, 5 games. And then a couple plays later, they created a turnover. So I missed my opportunity to be predictive. Yeah, I mean, I still want to see this team defensively start to create more turnovers because it's puzzling to me that they've had 1 in the last 5 games and they're as aggressive and as good at times as they have been. But you keep playing well in defense and you continue to but focus on Brady's arm and use that to set up these play actions and open little avenues to run for these running backs. I think they're going to be all right. And I think their schedule kind of softens a little bit here in the last stretch of the season, but we never really know when to say that because you look at the schedules ahead of the year and you think, oh, these 3 teams are going to be tough. And then they turn out to be 3 bad teams, So I don't want to say their schedule is going to be easy because nothing's been easy for this year so far.
Oh, the Lions have won 2 in a row.
Yeah.
Anything's possible, right? I mean, actually, that was another wildly entertaining game, right? Because Justin Fields, he's growing as a quarterback, and I did like him the best of that quarterback group in 2021. He's learning. I love the fact that he's physically and mentally tough. I think the teammates love him. He's a grinder. At any moment, he can go for 60 yards and a touchdown run, but also throw a pick six a series or 2 later. So that's the trick or treat that you get, especially with young quarterbacks. But I think a lot of those good intangibles are right there for him. But yeah, I mean, look at that game yesterday, 31-30. You had the Colts beating the Raiders 25-20 last night. Herbert got dinged a little bit and then really has no one to throw to, so he wasn't able to keep up with San Francisco. But yeah, down the stretch here, I think you look at Tampa Bay, the bye week comes at the right time. You're 5-5, you come off that long trip, regroup, and then you finish that final 7-game stretch and see where you're at. I would assume at the best you'd be the 3 seed, but more likely the 4 seed. And at that point, you're hosting the top wildcard team, which right now would be the Giants. Giants at Tampa in the wildcard round. That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, look, I mean, and again, I'm we've seen Tampa go on. See, that's the thing. We've seen them go on the road and win road playoff games and all that stuff. Yep. So I'm not saying that that's automatically going to happen this time around, but I certainly have more faith in them if they have to go on a stretch like that. So, and not to mention, look, the higher seeds in the conference aren't necessarily out of the question, as crazy as it sounds, John, because I mean, Minnesota obviously is playing great football right now. But I'm not going to bet the house on them, at this point. I think we both believe Philadelphia is a very good team, but 8-0 is nice, but still 9 games to go, so a lot can change in those 9 games, and we'll have to see what happens. So, all right, that's going to do it for us here today. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss this, see if the Eagles can go to 9-0 tonight against the Commanders. I think they will. And then again, 9-0 is a pretty pretty good way to start. Maybe Jalen Hurts might start getting some MVP discussion after tonight. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live. And, of course, go over to fullpresscoverage.com to check out everything going on over there. So thank you, everyone, and we will talk to you tomorrow.